Hi there and welcome back. Gordon Miller from G3 here. So I thought I'd go ahead and make a short video that explains something I touched on in the previous video. And that was, why does Hillary Clinton have her own email servers, either in the bathroom in Colorado or in the basement of her estate in New York? Well, I alluded to the fact that from 2004 to 2005, I worked as a consultant on the project with Northrop Grumman to develop the State Messaging Archive Retrieval Toolset, the SMART system, which is the official email system of the State Department. So in my role as one of the lead designers of the system, it was to come up with what the workflow and what the capabilities and the functional workflow was and things like that. So one of the things that I insisted on, which allowed the system to meet the government regulations, was the fact that every message had to have two people review and approve the message. So that means that even the Secretary of State would require the Deputy Secretary or somebody else to approve their message. Well, that didn't go over too well with then Secretary Colin Powell, but I was pretty adamant that I'm not designing a system that could be circumvented. And in fact, the archive, every message goes into an archive that cannot be opened. The messages cannot be erased. They cannot be altered. They're in there whether they're approved or not. And the great thing about that is that's the way it should be. That system was designed to meet the U.S. federal government regulations to make sure that any critical message about, I don't know, let's say Libya, Benghazi, those kind of things were not altered, and that people would have a record as required by law. And so I was adamant that I wasn't going to design it any other way. And eventually they gave in, and so the system ended up being sent to engineering to get built from our designs, which required two people to clear and approve a message. There was no independent, you don't clear or approve your own message, you had to have somebody else approve it. And that was the design that we submitted, and as I understand it, that's what got built in engineering and what's been deployed to 218 embassies all over the world. In that process, though, we went through the process of trying to figure out what was the right answer in terms of the right balance of workflow and approval and security and things like that. And the two components really were making sure that every message had two people that looked at it, because that's why there's two nuclear launch codes, or two nuclear launch keys. No one person can launch a nuclear missile unless they have arms that are 10 feet long. So the opportunity was to use the same kind of safeguards, and that's what we did. The great thing about that is that it required at least one other person to be knowledgeable about what went out. And I used to say that if you think that the wrong message sent at the wrong time couldn't do more damage to a country than a nuclear device, then they were kidding themselves. So I was really adamant that it have two people that had to review and approve a message. The other thing is that once the message was sent for approval, whether it was approved or not, it went into an archive that could not be opened. That was a repository that was not going to have people rummaging through it to delete stuff. That it was there for good. It was a permanent record, and so there were audit trails and other stuff like that were implemented to make sure that no message went missing in the process. So those were two of the safeguards that were put in place. Well, when Colin Powell left prematurely after his fallout with George Bush, and Condoleezza Rice came in, Condoleezza Rice didn't care much, whether the requirements were one way or another, and it got developed that way, as I understand it. So, in the final version, the final version of it is, classified. Nothing I'm sharing with you is classified, and we all know what the process is of the emails from what's been published already in what's been published on WikiLeaks and in the messages and stuff that you can dig through and see that the Clintons wanted their own servers so they didn't have to go through the process of having it go through the repository that was built for the State Department. And certainly Clinton Foundation messages, a bunch of other stuff like that was part of that traffic, would not have been appropriate for personal messages. There was a capability for personal messages in the State Department system, but they were still archived, and so it would still have been subject to an archival capability, and I don't think they wanted that. They wanted to be able to have control over which messages made it into the public. I'm glad the other messages became public, and I'm glad that we all learned the content of those messages. I think it's very damaging. I know that during the two and a half years that I worked with Northrop Grumman and the State Department on the system, if I had violated any of the information from even just one of those messages, I would be in jail. So I know that, that's, how she's able to get away with that, I have no idea. But I'm not here to judge that. I'll leave that to the FBI and everybody else. I'm just talking about, the small footnote in history that I get to take for helping to design the system. We had a tremendous engineering team at Northrop Grumman. I'm very fortunate that G3 was able to participate directly, and it was a great process. I still have some great friends working on the system now, and so they'll back me up on this. But we did it the way it was supposed to be done, and it was our contribution to America and our contribution to the State Department. When the system was implemented, I believe in late 2008, early 2009, when Secretary Clinton came to office, when Obama took office and appointed Secretary Clinton, she would have had to been using that system. I believe the SMART system went live somewhere in that time period, and I'm not sure what the final in-service date is. But a lot's been made of whether Colin Powell or Condoleezza Rice had their own servers. I do believe they had email servers, certainly, but I think those email servers were in the U.S. Department of State server room. There were different server rooms used for different purposes, but they were still under physical and electronic security provided by the Department of State. They were not their own private servers. They were not in their own private residence. So don't be confused by that issue. So, with so much being made of the emails and things like that, again, I don't say this to brag about my role and all that. It's one of those things that all the Benghazi messages for the 6 months leading up to it will be in the SMART system. I'm sure they're all classified. But the trail of requests leading up to what happened in Benghazi would all be a record in the system. Because the official requests from the State Department would have come into the system, and they would be there. So the history of what people are talking about in terms of the multiple requests and the request for additional security and the timelines and everything, having watched the movie 13 Hours, I can say that that's probably, based on my understanding, probably the most accurate movie about that scenario. But the State Department email server itself, I'm grateful to have been part of that. I'm glad that our insistence on adherence to the law and adherence to proper security and design methodologies led to people having to seek an alternative. If our system could have been compromised, I'm sure Secretary Clinton would have compromised our system and used it as opposed to trying to use her own system. I appreciate all the hard work that the Northrop Grumman team and all the subcontractors put in. I'm grateful for the opportunity that G3 had to participate in the development of the SMART messaging system for the State Department. And some of the finest people that I've met and had a chance to work with are the people in the actual State Department itself. Dr. Barry Fulton, the father of SMART, amazing guy. Larry Emery, the various ambassadors that we ran into, just amazing people. And I have to say that it was a great experience, and the support that I got and the way I was treated and the just amazing intelligence of the people we were working with was unbelievable. And it's a shame that this scandal has cast some doubt on the State Department. All the time that I spent there, the people were nothing but amazing. And, I'm grateful for the opportunity. And I just wanted to share with you all, some of the interesting footnotes in history. I've got a couple of others that I'll share. But I wanted to go ahead and get this out there ahead of the election. Vote November 8th. I know who I'm voting for. I can't vote for somebody who circumvented the law in that kind of way. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. I'm hoping that everybody understands the importance of the election come November 8th, and vote your conscience. I mean, your real conscience. Understand that actions have consequences, and the vote you cast will determine what happens over the next 8 years of this country. And hopefully this will give you all a little bit of insight into, the situation and how this scandal became what it was, and our, minor role in the whole thing. All right. Thank you very much. Vote November 8th.